The night my marriage fell apart. Betrayed on our anniversary. I had spent weeks planning it, our 10th wedding anniversary, a whole decade of life together, memories, struggles, and triumphs. I wanted to commemorate that, to show Sarah how much she still meant to me. Over the past few months, things had changed between us, but I thought this could be the night to remind us both why we fell in love. I wanted to believe that, despite the growing distance between us, this anniversary dinner would somehow bring us back together. Sarah and I had chosen an upscale restaurant for our first date years ago, a little out of our price range at the time, but it had become a meaningful place to us. So, I booked the same place for our anniversary. The restaurant wasn't as fancy as I remembered it, but it was the nostalgia that mattered. I worked with the restaurant's staff to make sure everything was perfect. The menu was customized for us, featuring her favorite dishes. I had even arranged for her favorite vintage Merlot, one that we had shared on special occasions over the years. The playlist I requested had songs that marked the milestones of our life together, and the table was set in a cozy corner under soft, romantic lighting. It was all just right, but as the evening approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Over the past 6 months, Sarah had changed. She had become more distant, detached even. She was always preoccupied, absorbed by her phone or some vague work obligation. We used to talk about everything, but now there was a wall between us, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to break through it. She had begun coming home late. She'd tell me it was work or that she had gone out with friends, but there was an emptiness in her excuses that gnawed at me. It wasn't just the late nights or the tired looks anymore. It was the absence of intimacy, the way she would avoid looking into my eyes or flinch whenever I reached for her hand. I knew something was wrong, but I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that she was stressed or going through something she wasn't ready to share. I waited at the restaurant, feeling a growing sense of dread with each passing minute. I glanced at my watch, the seconds ticking by, growing louder in the silence of the nearly empty dining room. The waiters came and went, occasionally stopping by to ask if I was ready to order or needed anything else. I declined each time, my gaze fixed on the door, hoping to see her walk through at any moment. Minutes turned into an hour, then two. My phone remained silent. No text, no call. My gut churned with anxiety, but I resisted the urge to dial her number. There was a part of me that didn't want to know the reason for her absence, a part that feared the truth. Finally, just as I was about to give up and leave, she arrived. I saw her the moment she walked in. The familiar figure of my wife stood in the doorway, but she looked nothing like the woman I had married. Her hair was disheveled, as if she had run her fingers through it too many times, and her clothes were wrinkled, like they had been slept in. Her eyes, once so vibrant and full of life, were dull and tired. The light makeup she had applied earlier in the day was now smudged around her eyes. There was something else, too, a faint, unfamiliar scent clinging to her skin. It wasn't her perfume. It wasn't mine either. She walked toward me, her movements sluggish, almost reluctant. She sat down across from me without a word, her eyes flickering up to meet mine for a split second before she looked away, guilt etched into every line of her face. "I'm sorry I'm late," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "Work got crazy, and then I got caught up with some things." I stared at her, my mind racing. The words sounded rehearsed, like she had practiced them in her head on the way over. But they lacked conviction, and in that moment I knew. I knew what had kept her from our anniversary dinner, what had pulled her away from me for months. "Where were you last night?" I asked, my voice steady, though I could feel the storm of emotions brewing beneath the surface. She blinked, caught off guard by the question. I told you. I had to stay late at work. There was this big project and—" "Don't lie to me, Sarah." My voice was firmer this time, and I saw her flinch. "Where were you, really? And who were you with?" The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the table, trying to steady herself. It was in that moment, in her silence, that the full weight of her betrayal hit me. "You've been cheating on me," I said, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. "Haven't you?" Her lips parted, and for a brief moment I thought she might deny it, but then the tears started to well up in her eyes, and she nodded, ever so slightly. "Mark, I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered, her voice cracking. It just happened. I didn't want to hurt you." The anger I had kept at bay erupted inside me. "You didn't want to hurt me? You've been lying to me for months, Sarah. While I've been here trying to hold this marriage together, you've been out with him, whoever the hell he is." "It wasn't like that," she sobbed, reaching across the table for my hand, but I pulled away. "It was a mistake. I swear, it was a mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "You don't accidentally end up in someone else's bed. You made a choice, Sarah. You chose to cheat. You chose to destroy everything we've built." Her tears fell freely now, but I couldn't find it in me to feel sorry for her. The woman sitting across from me was a stranger, someone I no longer recognized. The Sarah I married, the Sarah I loved, wouldn't have done this. "How long?" I asked, my voice hollow. "How long have you been lying to me?" She hesitated, wiping at her tears, as if trying to decide whether to tell me the full truth. "It started a few months ago," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was a stupid fling. It didn't mean anything, Mark. Please, believe me." I stared at her in disbelief. "A few months? You've been carrying this on for months, and now you're telling me it didn't mean anything? You've been living a double life, Sarah. How can you expect me to believe that?" "I'm sorry," she cried, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you." I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor as I pushed it back. "No, Sarah," I said, shaking my head. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied to me. You wouldn't have chosen him." Her sobs grew louder as she stood, trying to reach for me again, but I stepped back. "Mark, please," she begged, her voice desperate. "Don't leave. We can fix this. We can work through it. I made a mistake, but I still love you. I don't want to lose you." I paused at the doorway, turning back to look at her one last time. "You already lost me the moment you chose him over me," I said quietly. "This marriage is over, Sarah." And with that, I walked out of the restaurant, leaving her behind, her sobs echoing in the dimly lit room. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, but it did nothing to soothe the burning ache in my chest. I had spent 10 years building a life with Sarah, trusting her, loving her, only to have it all come crashing down in one devastating night. As I drove home in silence, the weight of what had just happened began to settle in. The life we had shared, the memories we had made, all felt tainted now, poisoned by her betrayal. I had always believed that love could withstand anything, that as long as we were honest with each other, we could get through anything. But this was too much. When I got home, I sat in the living room, staring at the walls that had once felt like home, but now seemed empty, hollow. The house was silent, but my mind was loud with the echoes of our shattered marriage. How had it come to this? How had I missed the signs? Or maybe I hadn't missed them. Maybe I had chosen to ignore them because the truth was too painful to face. Hours passed, and eventually Sarah came home. She stood in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen from crying, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her. She tried to talk, to apologize again, but I couldn't listen. The damage was done, and there was no going back. For the next few days we barely spoke. I slept in the guest room, unable to even be in the same bed as her. The woman I had once considered my soulmate had become a stranger, someone I could no longer trust. And trust, once broken, was impossible to rebuild. Eventually, Sarah moved out. She went to stay with her sister, leaving me alone in the house we had once shared. The divorce papers came soon after, a cold, clinical end to what had once been a loving marriage.
There were no more words left to say. We were done. It's been months now, and the pain is still there, though dulled by time. I often wonder how things might have turned out if she had been honest with me from the start, if she had come to me before it was too late. But that's the thing about betrayal. It leaves you with a million what-ifs and no real answers. As for Sarah, I don't know where she is or what she's doing now, and honestly, I don't care. The woman I loved is gone, and in her place is a memory of someone who hurt me in ways I never thought possible. But I'll survive. I'll heal, slowly but surely. Our anniversary, once a symbol of love and commitment, is now just a reminder of the night my world fell apart. But maybe one day, I'll look back and see it as the night I began to rebuild myself.